Thank you, Gary. Thank you so very, very much. Always enjoy what he has to share each year. Well, ladies and gentlemen, coming now is the former president of Concerned Women for America, also served as president for the Culture Campaign. For 10 years, she hosted her own radio talk show in Chicago and has won numerous awards, including 7 Silver Microphone Awards, an Angel Award, and the 2010 Radio Personality of the Year Award by the National Religious Broadcasters. Today, she is a Fox News contributor, national columnist, vice president of Family PAC Federal, and the host of Sandy Rios in the Morning on AFR Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome now to the podium, Sandy Rios.
Thank you. So how you doing? It's time for your nap, right? Okay, so it's my job to wake you up. Well, he's told you everything there is to know about me, so I'll see you later. But, you know, American Family Association is the sponsor of the radio show. That is the radio show I do in the morning. I do the morning show. We're on 190 stations. And, you know, AFA doesn't have a person here in D.C. I'm kind of it. I represent AFA at a lot of meetings. So sometimes people don't know the extent and the reach of AFA. We have 2.5 million constituents. We have 190 radio stations. We have a journal. And just, you know, not that long ago, the SPLC has decided that we are, in fact, a hate group. And they sent a letter. They sent a letter. I don't know if you know this, but this is what I want you to know today as I speak to you. This letter went out this week. We understand, sir, this is a letter from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and GLAAD, and the Human Rights Campaign, and the NAACP, and the National Council of La Raza, People for the American Way. They all joined on this letter. They wrote to every congressperson that was to speak at this conference this week, and this is what they said. We understand that you've been invited to speak at the upcoming Values Voter Summit. Given the demonizing lies about the LGBT community spread by the host, the Family Research Council, and another major sponsor of the event, the American Family Association, we urge you not to lend the prestige of your office to the summit. Every single congressperson, every senator that you have heard has received this letter and this warning from these groups. And they ended by warning us that Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, said just last year, people in this country, no matter straight or gay, deserve dignity and respect. The question before you today, therefore, is whether the party of Lincoln stands in 2013 on vilifying the LGBT community. You can help answer that question by saying no to the bigotry and declining the invitation to speak. Well, that's where we are. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about this. This is a tough topic because it is a dangerous time to be a Christian conservative. I'll tell you what I mean. Along with that letter that they sent out to all the congressmen, they are actually running ads against Randy Forbes down in Virginia, trying to disparage him for being part of the American Family Association's banquet today and for being here. You should see the ad. I wish I had it to run for you. There are threats being made. And we all know that a little more than a year ago, Floyd Corkins came into the offices of the Family Research Council because he had looked on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, checked their list of hate groups, found FRC and a couple of others, gone into the building with the idea that he would commit mass murder, with a bag full of Chick-fil-A sandwiches that he was going to stuff in their mouths after he murdered them. We know that the building manager stopped that. He was badly injured himself, but he wasn't killed. But he's paid a tremendous price for that. And do you know that the Southern Poverty Law Center has refused to apologize or express regret in any way, and they have refused to remove the names of the Family Research Council, the American Family Association, on their list of hate groups? Well, that's not so shocking because we know that there are groups and there are people on the left that are fringe groups. They don't have much influence and they are free to hate, even in this country. But let me tell you something about why this is important. The Southern Poverty Law Center sounds great, doesn't it? You know, it's always had a reputation, sort of a history of helping people in the civil rights movement, and they've had a good reputation. That's what people think they do, but that's not really what they do. Let me give you an explanation. They were founded in 1971 by attorneys Morris Deeds and Joseph Levin Jr. They made their fortune in direct mail. And those of us in the in the conservative circles know what direct mail is, but they were selling cookbooks, doormats, and tractor seat cushions. This is how they made their fortune. Dees became a top fundraiser for McGovern, Carter, Kennedy, and Hart in all their presidential races. And allegedly, the story goes, was able to get the mailing lists from these candidates in order to springboard the fundraising efforts of the SPLC, which were, by the way, quite successful. The Southern Poverty Law Center now has millions of dollars in funding, endowments in excess of $223 million, and lots of offshore accounts. Let me just say that the American Institute of Philanthropy has given an F grade to the SPLC for their excessive reserves. But I would tell you that their main business is attacking and suing conservative organizations. They are out to destroy people like the Family Research Council, the American Family Association, and people like you. Hate is a cottage industry for the SPLC. And let me give you just an idea of some of the things that they do. They have a hate map, and they list on their hate map, at least at this writing, they listed 1,018 groups. So the interesting thing about it is the statistics on crime, the hate crimes between 1996 and 2011 decreased by 29%, while the number of hate groups the SPLC identified rose 69%. A little strange. And when law enforcement and others looked into this list, they found that many of these groups don't even exist. And so the SPLC, I have to say, is not to be trusted. And yet, the reason I'm spending so much time telling you about them is that, in fact, they are used as a resource by the Department of Homeland Security, the Justice Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Pentagon, and thousands of local law enforcement agencies. And they conduct trainings all around the country informing these groups of who the haters are, and we are on that list. We're on that list. Just last night, I received a photo in the mail, it's not a very good copy, but this is what it is, and I'll tell you what this is. This is a training for military men. I don't even know what branch of service. It was a candid photo taken by a soldier, and it shows a screenshot that they're doing this training in the military, and on the top of it says American Family Association, and next to it is Fred Phelps. Anyone know who Fred Phelps is? Fred Phelps claims to be a pastor, but he is just an absolute, I can't think of the right words, disgrace. He says that God hates fags. He's that guy. Nothing to do with any of us here or with any of the efforts of the American Family Association or of FRC, and yet that's who they put in the photo under American Family Association, is the man who carries the banners, goes and protests at funerals. This is the kind of distortions. And it's interesting to me, if you're in the FBI and you lie about something, let's see, you misreport your time card, you misrepresent where you drove your car, do you know you could be fired for that? And yet the FBI is looking to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is nothing but prevarications and lies like the one I'm showing you right here, for their source on who to go after as hate groups. It's amazing to me, and it's disgusting and disgraceful. And let me just say that at this point, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that wonderful civil rights group who cares more about going after and discrediting and suing Christians than they do about protecting the rights of African Americans, has absolutely no remorse about what happened at FRC. They have refused to apologize. They have no remorse whatsoever. In response to that, they've come after Tony Perkins, and you've probably been tracking that, haven't you? You'll hear something surely about that. Tony has really been valiant in his fight, but they're trying to demonize him. Everywhere he goes, they're going after Tony Perkins. And Tim Wildman, who's the president of AFA, and we're co-sponsors of this event, made this statement about what the SPLC is doing. He said they have taken snippets of comments of the American Family Association personnel, ripped them out of their context, distorted their meaning, and then used these snippets to paint a false picture of AFA. The truth is that the American Family Association doesn't hate anyone. We love everyone, including homosexuals, enough to tell them the truth about the moral, spiritual, and physical dangers of homosexual conduct. And then he goes on to talk about the values that we stand for, the ones that make America great, And we stand for Christian faith, the moral standards of the Ten Commandments, marriage and the family, and public policy centered on the unchanging standards of Scripture. All right, so this is what's happening, and that's why it is a dangerous time to be a Christian conservative. You know, homosexuality has arguably become the most dangerous issue to discuss publicly, to write about. I happen to know this personally. There are death threats, there are unbelievable things happen when you stand up. We know the history of it. I could spend a long time telling you about, starting with Anita Bryant in this country, what's happened. And so more and more people are scared to talk about this. But we cannot be, and we will not be, I have to tell you, because there are lives at stake here. And I'll tell you what I mean. I think that American voters, and American politicians for that matter, are where Americans were on the issue of abortion in the 1980s. You may remember that in 1973, when Roe v. Wade was passed, there were not that many people in favor of abortion. There were like 3 states that were considering legalizing it, but people were appalled by that. Later, in the 70s and the 80s, there was this all-out propaganda push by the media. Walter Cronkite was part of that. He lied about the number of so-called back alley abortions. He fabricated that, and he perpetuated that myth. They talked about, they made it sound as though it was just a blob of tissue. You know the story. I've been at pro-life gatherings where someone strange would be in the room, and by strange I mean appearance strange, behaving strangely, and I remember sitting right next to a person like that, and all the national media cameras came to that person, and they were focused on that person. They didn't capture any mom and dad in the room, no children, they just caught that, and then the strange person then was playing to the camera and doing very strange things, and that was the face of the pro-life movement, and that's how, by the 1980s, it was just anathema to be pro-life for a politician. And so the Republican Party decided they needed a big tent because, you know, we all have to be able to disagree about this. But I would say that Christian conservatives continued to talk about what was true. And eventually the facts caught up with what the reality was. With the advent of 4D ultrasound, with the debate over partial birth abortion, and most recently, the whole business about Kermit Gosnell and his horrible abortion clinic, minds have been changed. And so I don't know what the percentage is, but most of the Republican congressmen now serving, are pro-life. And that's because the American people's minds and hearts have been changed. Well, my point is that we, I think, are now, as a public, on homosexuality where we were on abortion in the 80s. All we know is what we hear on television and the media and Hollywood. We see these glossy movies that are airbrushed. We see decorating shows. Many of us have gay people in our families. But to have a gay person in your family and to think that you fully understand what's going on is to say, I have a cousin that's a doctor. You don't necessarily understand just because. And I think we are fighting a barrage of propaganda, and there is punishment if you dare speak out and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure that's right. Don't dare say that. In the Justice Department, a memo just went out just a few months ago to managers saying to them, you must not speak against homosexuality. And by the way, silence is not enough. You must affirm. You can't talk about relationships in terms of man and wife. You have to talk about partner. And by the way, when you're at the water cooler, be sure we're listening to your conversations. You think it's not a hard, difficult time to be a Christian conservative at Justice? I can tell you that it is. And so then we have our kids. Our kids have grown up in an absolute ocean of propaganda on the homosexual issue. Started back in the 80s with a video called It's Elementary, pure propaganda for teachers and for kids, the rainbow curriculum that started in New York. And so all our kids have known, right now we have these, all these projects that talk about hate. We have the Matthew Shepard story. Our kids really are just the products of the propaganda of the public school system. And that is why, when I read the Republican so-called autopsy report that came out just last year, in which they suggested that we need to alter our viewpoint on this because our kids are not where we are. And we're going to lose them if we don't change our viewpoint or be quiet about it. And I have more to say about that. Let me just say, this is what we don't know. I'll tell you a few things that we don't know. The American public does not know. Everyone knows about Matthew Shepard, at least you know the name. Matthew Shepard was murdered a number of years ago. He was murdered brutally, and there's certainly no happiness about that. And by the way, there's no happiness about hate. Don't misunderstand or misquote me. We're talking about the distortion of information. Matthew Shepard was a young gay man who was brutally murdered by two other young men. And the story was that they murdered him because he was gay, and he became a martyr for the gay movement. In fact, the hate crimes bill was passed with his name attached to it. Bill Clinton jumped all over this, and the New York Times took it and ran with the story and told us all kinds of things about Matthew Shepard. But probably, in fact, they created a play called The Laramie Project that was shown, it still is, in high schools, even in junior highs across the country, the story of Matthew Shepard, except, wait a second, it wasn't true. It wasn't true. We know now because a book that just came out last week written by gay author Stephen Jimenez. And by the way, this book was featured in The Advocate, which is arguably the nation's most influential gay publication, featured this book. And now we know the story was a complete fraud. Matthew Shepard was gay. Matthew Shepard was murdered by these two boys, but it was a drug deal gone bad. Matthew Shepard, according to this author, and I remember the police record actually showed some of this, but you never heard about this, not in the media, that Matthew Shepard had actually cheated them on a drug deal, at least they thought that he had. They were very mad, and they actually had sex with him. They were not upset that he was gay. They also either were gay or bisexual. This is part of the story. And so the fairy tale was spun around the tragic life of Matthew Shepard, and it was made up. It was lies, all lies. Does that remind you of any other story that was spun over another issue? Roe versus Wade, anybody know the story there? And I'm not even going to go into it, because we know now that the story that was the foundation for the laws that made abortion legal for all 9 months in this country were lies. They were prevarications. And so we have the same thing in the story of Matthew Shepard. I'll tell you what else Americans don't know about. When I was debating this on television a lot, when I was at CWA, the one thing that I would debate that was almost like, you remember the old movies with Dracula and the Cross. If you ever want to get into a heated debate about homosexuality, you talk about the health risks. And it doesn't take too much effort to find information that is extremely troubling. The CDC just published information recently to say that 94 to 95% of new HIV cases among boys and young men are linked to homosexual sex. 94 to 95% of HIV cases. The CDC also goes on to explore the other things that boys who are into gay sex do that are health risks. We know that there are many of them, and yet people are not allowed to know about this. The other thing that we don't know about is the fact that there is an ex-gay movement. Did you know September was ex-gay awareness month? Anybody know that in this room? Anybody know an ex-gay? You know what? They are everywhere, and the reason you don't hear about them is because they are maligned and threatened. I remember when Stephen Bennett was speaking for us at CWA, and we wanted him to be on with Bill O'Reilly. Stephen was trying to tell his story about how he'd come out and how he was married and had children and wanted to tell his story, and honestly, Bill would not let him talk. Would not let him talk. And I can't even think of an ex-gay person, lesbian or gay, that I've seen on television since. Have you? Anybody in this room? You seen anybody tell their story on television? There are tons of ex-gays with fabulous stories, but the American people don't even know about that. And yet, if we tell the truth about this, we are haters. The people that lie, those are the ones that love. And I would like to say that I am kind of optimistic in this regard. I know it's kind of hard to find optimism in all this. One of the things that compels me, and always has, I just don't think you can really care about people and not tell them the truth. Why would we promote homosexuality so thoroughly and not be able to speak about it in public schools when we know that it actually puts these especially young guys at risk for HIV and all these other diseases when it shortens their lifespan? Why would we do that? And because we want to stop that, we are the ones who hate? I don't get that, yet I do, because good is called evil and evil is called good. You know that. We are living in an upside-down world. It is a dangerous time to be a Christian conservative. But I think that when Americans catch up with the facts on the human and the financial costs, because there are huge financial costs, they will change their mind about this. They just don't know. They just don't know. And I'd say politicians don't know either. One time when I was living earlier, I was at my first iteration in D.C. as president of CWA, a young woman who was a filmmaker from New York came and asked if she could spend some time with me. She was certainly not a conservative. She lived in Greenwich Village. She was surrounded by the gay community, and she wanted to just film me because I was an oddity speaking the way I did about this. And she did. We talked. She asked me questions. We did the interview, and when it was over, she said, "I want to talk to you." She said, "I have always been a defender of the gay community. I care about them. They are my friends." But she said, "I am seeing so much death and heartache and disease and sadness in this community that I can hardly bear it. And I don't know even what to think about it anymore." These are the stories that you're not hearing. And let me just say to the SPLC, to Republican leaders who feel that this subject is just too icky, to some of you who are maybe even afraid to make a stand on it, maybe you feel that you're not even certain yourself because you have been so awash in the propaganda of the public, let me say to you that we cannot change the truth to appease and win voters. We cannot change the truth to please our children. Since when do we look to our children for our moral compass? I don't understand this except to say that the parents of the 60s and 70s were so woefully lost and confused and uncertain about what they actually believe that they are ill-equipped to teach their children what's true about sexuality. And so we have a generation, we have politicians telling us we should listen to our children. We can't do that. If we love them, we must teach them and lead them, and we cannot change the truth to please our children. We can't change the truth to stop the criticisms or the attacks from the SPLC or any of the other groups on this letter. We can't deny the truth to protect ourselves from financial threats. Can we say IRS? From intimidation? Can we talk about all the things that happen in media, the way people are being destroyed, or even fear of bodily harm? We cannot do that. Millions of gay men and lesbians are caught in a powerful web of deceit that is breaking hearts. Gay men and women love each other. They love each other. But what happens is, because the love is misplaced, they find themselves in a series of heartbreaking situations. There is such heartbreak. Have you ever had your heart broken in a romantic relationship? You know, in the homosexual life, especially with men, there are so many partners. There's so much heartbreak and rejection. You think youth is worshipped in heterosexual sex. It is top of the line. They like young men, young virile men. When you get old and you're a gay man, there's so much rejection. There's heartache. We can't be silent because we care about those people. It's breaking hearts and costing lives. We will continue to offer homosexual men and women hope of redemption and life change, which Christian conservatives know all about. We don't say what we say because we are somehow morally superior, and we've never struggled with any of these kinds of things. We say this because many of us have had our lives powerfully transformed by the power of Jesus Christ, and we cannot be silent about that. We will continue to speak the truth and offer gay men and women hope of the redemption and life change that we have each experienced through the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much, and may God have mercy on our country and bless America. Thank you so much.